afternoon, everybody. Very warm welcome to Wicklow's Green Dance Laboratory 2021. My name is Adrienne Brown, and I will be facilitating this afternoon's session along with Emer Byrne and Marisa Hayes. This is Wicklow's Green Dance Laboratory's focus on Martha Graham. We will come to more detail about that in a moment, but first I just want to say that I want to give thanks to those who made this possible, this funding which came from the Arts Council of Ireland and also Lergus funding. I would also like to thank Dance Ireland, Laois Youth Dance Platform and Clinkerdane Experimental Arts Salon. I would also like to thank all the team who are with me and all of the artists who are participating this afternoon. So without further ado, I want to say that we have the great pleasure of beginning this afternoon's presentation with a live stream dance performance from Paris. And we will have the following two dancers, and I'm going to tell you about them. Jean-Baptiste Ferreira trained in the Martha Graham Dance School in New York, where he studied with former lead dancers of the Martha Graham Company, such as Denise Vale, Peggy Lyman, Jacqueline Buglisi, Steve Rooks, and Virginie Messane. As a member of Graham 2, formerly the Martha Graham Ensemble, he performed in various Graham works, including Diversion of Angels, Maple Leaf Rag, Acts of Light, Plain of Prayers, Canticle for Innocent Comedians, Celebration, Secular Games, Rite of Spring, El Penitente, Appalachian Spring, Dark Meadow, and Embattled Garden. He is a member of the European Graham Teachers Network and the Graham Heritage Promoting Collective. Beg your pardon. He's part of the Heritage Promoting Collective, Graham for Europe. He is joined by Rafael Molina, who trained at the Conservatoire National de Région de Saint-Étienne. Rafael Molina studied classical and contemporary dance there and worked with companies in residence, including the Ballet Malandain. At the Saint-Chamond National Dance Competition, he was awarded first accessit in 1998 and gold medal in 1999. Jury under the discretion of Alain Deves of the Paris Opera. A Sciences Po Paris graduate with a research master's degree in political theory in 2011, he was awarded the prestigious Fulbright Scholarship from the US government in 2012 to study the Graham technique in its New York cradle. In 2013, he joined the Young Ballet of the Martha Graham School, Graham 2, the same company, and danced in the repertoire. Back in France, Rafael continues his career as an interpreter and working also as an assistant choreographer for the If Unam Boli Dance Company. He regularly teaches the Graham technique at the Harmonic Studio and at Rick Odom's Training Institute in Paris. In 2017, he founded Graham for Europe, which is an organization based in Paris that promotes the teaching of the Graham technique, connecting European professionals through masterclasses, meetings, conferences, and exchanges with New York. Jean-Baptiste and Rafael will be performing for us now a live stream section, Helios, which is from the 1981 original full work, which is called Acts of Light. So let us go to this live stream. Thank you so much, Jean-Baptiste and Rafael, for that beautiful piece. So this is, of course, from the original repertoire of Martha Graham. And we're going to really be spending time discussing and essentially looking at the work of this great iconic 20th century dance master as time goes on. But I just would like to thank the two men and to say to catch their breath, and in due course they will join us, and in a short while they will also be giving some of their experiences, so they will be speaking to you in a few moments. But first of all, I would like to warmly welcome the two panel members who are joining me here today. Now, for those of you who've been with us during the week, you will already have met Marisa Hayes. So Marisa, you might like to just give a little wave and say hi, maybe say briefly who you are.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Adrienne. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm currently based in Burgundy, France. I'm a screen dance artist and curator, and I've been teaching workshops here during the festival throughout the week.
Thank you very much indeed. And Emer Byrne, would you like to unmute and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yes, thanks so much, Adrienne. And again, it's a pleasure to be here today. Yeah, I'm Emer Byrne. I'm a dance artist and I'm from Bray in County Wicklow. So very supportive of this Wicklow Screen Dance Festival. I'm currently based in Dublin, but have also been a part of the festival this week, delivering a Two Can Do mantra workshop that we did yesterday as part of the festival. And it's just a pleasure to be here. And yeah, thanks, Adrienne.
Thank you very much, Emer. And so Marisa and Emer will be joining with me this afternoon in kind of keeping an eye on proceedings and contributing as and when they feel fit, of course, naturally. I'd like to also introduce some of the other artists who are present with us. So we have Róisín. Hi, Róisín. Unmute there and say hi and tell us who you are.
Hi everyone, I'm Róisín. I'm a dance artist based in Carlow. I worked a lot in the UK, so I'm just back now thanks to COVID. So thanks so much for having me today. That was beautiful. I'm really excited to see a bit more of what's to come.
Thank you, Róisín. And now it is my great pleasure to meet for the very first time Mathilde No, who's joining us from France. And hello, Mathilde, you're so very welcome.
Hi, nice to meet you, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. I currently live in Switzerland, but I'm a French video maker.
Thank you, and apologies, I got the country wrong. Yes, you did tell me you were in Switzerland. I apologize about that. But yes, and Mathilde will have some very interesting things to offer as we go through the afternoon. Yes, I think we're going to find that really interesting. And as I say, Jean-Baptiste and Rafael are with us also. And we will probably be joined later in the afternoon by, oh, here's Lorenza. Oh, great. Lorenza, if you have a minute and if you can unmute and show your video, it would be great if you just say a quick hello. Hi, Lorenza. As they say, you're on mute. Don't worry, it's okay, Lorenza. I can see she's smiling and waving at us there. That's fine. That's okay, Lorenza, no problem. And we're going to see a piece from Lorenza later this afternoon as well. Okay, so I think we'll just maybe get into the proceedings, the work of the day, as they say. So I would like to say that I'm going to give a presentation now. I'm going to speak to you about the story really of Martha Graham and my life. So perhaps we will go into a screen share. Okay, just gathering a few things together. It's all. Yes, so I'm from Dublin. I started with ballet as a child and have such a great love for ballet, still do. And I did, like many people, I started with ballet and went up through the grades and did all the shows and all of that kind of thing. And then at a later stage in my life, I met a certain woman who we're going to learn about in a moment, and she introduced me to Martha Graham technique. And from there on, my life changed completely. Or at least my life took a different direction. Now, I'm having some problems with getting into presentation mode. So if you permit me, I'm going to use this with the thumbnails on the side, if that's okay. So, Okay, I think I may have it here. Oh yes, it's coming up now. Yeah. Yeah, great. Okay, so I don't want to dwell too much on my early life, but just what I would like to say is that I'm a choreographer. I'm somebody who teaches. I'm an academic. I have a PhD. I'm former chair of Dance Ireland. I mean, there are many different parts to my life, but it's all revolving around dance. But this Martha Graham had a huge influence on me, and we'll explore that. So, as we know, here's a quote from Martha Graham. She was born in 1898 and lived until 1991. And here's a picture of her as an elderly woman, but I think it's a very, very beautiful picture and a lovely quote, which is, "I believe that we learn by practice, whether it means to learn to dance by practicing dancing or to learn to live by practicing living. The principles are the same." I think that the reason dance has held such an ageless magic for the world is that it has been the symbol of the performance of living. And I really like that quote, because in relation with what we've been talking about, we've been investigating, looking at screen dance, we've been talking about the nature of art, we've been talking about the crossover between the screen, the dance, the performance, and so forth. But what this quote tells me is the reason why the arts are so, and dance in this case, is so vital to life is because, as she says, it's a symbol of the performance of living. So she in this quote is saying that we practice to become dancers, and maybe we practice in certain areas of our lives too. I think it's a very lovely quote. A little biography. I won't go into any great detail because we'll be hearing more about that later from the other speakers, but we can say that she was born in a suburb of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and her family moved to Santa Barbara in California when she was 8 years old. She was 17 and saw a performance by Ruth St. Denis, and then she went to the school run by St. Denis and her partner Ted Shawn. Her performing career began with the Dennis Shawn Touring Company, where she danced for 7 years before creating her own company. She was a prolific choreographer, creating 181 dances in her lifetime. Her technique evolved from her study of the effect of breathing. She took the natural rhythm of exhale, inhale, and turned it into a whole body contraction, the tightening of the muscles, and release, or letting go. This basis for Graham's technique helped her to express the underlying tension present in much of her choreography, that of opposing forces. The dancers in her work are often caught between conflicting desires, between giving into their passion or rage or controlling themselves and exercising restraint. Graham was interested in human emotions and motivations. To explore these themes, she focused on historical individuals of interest and their personal struggles or difficult choices. She created several works using stories from Greek myths, but chose to tell these tales from a woman's perspective rather than the usual male hero's point of view. She had a powerful stage presence and danced the main character's role in many of her works, performing well into her 70s. And it's well known and was pointed out earlier, I think it was last night actually, that she had a very, very strong, powerful presence. And yes, she was the center of her own world in her dance, for sure. But what I will come to tell you about in a moment or two is that this woman, Therese Nelson, came to Ireland in the late 60s and set up her own dance studio and started to teach Graham technique. But in finding out, I went on a search to find out, Therese Nelson, I was in her life, or she was in my life, let's put it that way, for probably about a year or 2 years at the most. And as I say, she completely altered the direction of my life. And I subsequently went on to study in London and eventually going to New York, maybe some time later. But she sort of disappeared out of my life. I never found out what happened to her, and I don't know the date of her death. And I really want to take a moment to really honor her I've been feeling this for a long time, actually, the importance to honor Therese Nelson for what she did for dance, not just for me, but there were other dancers who were deeply affected by her work. And although she had a very powerful impact, I think in some respects she has been slightly forgotten in the story of dance in Ireland. And I want to just take this moment to honour that and to really respect what she did and to give thanks as well. And while I was doing this little bit of research, I came across some other interesting stuff that I thought was relevant. And we're going to look at that now. So there were other relatively unknown, but not completely unknown people who were involved in what we might call modern or contemporary dance. The term can fluctuate a little bit, but these go back a bit earlier to the 1940s and 50s. So we'll just have a quick look at some of this. So the progenitors of modern dance in Ireland. So one woman is Jacqueline Robinson. She was 1922 to 2000, and she was the founder of the Atelier de la Danse in Paris, the first school in France to offer professional training in modern dance. She translated the famous German dancer, choreographer and teacher Mary Wigman's language of dance into French. Indeed, she studied with Mary Wigman and was greatly influenced by her. In the early 1940s, she moved to Dublin, joining the Irish School of Dance at 39 Harcourt Street, founded by the German-born but half-Irish Irina Brady, who had herself studied with Rudolf von Laban and Wigman. Along with June Fryer, the trio performed many original choreographies. Productions took place at both the Abbey and the Peacock Theatres, including several collaborations with the poet Austin Clarke and his Lyric Theatre Company. So as I say, this is all relatively new to me. And just as a coincidental as an aside here, this woman, Irina Brady, I have a friend who's not a dance friend, but she contacted me not so long ago and she said, have you heard about Irina Brady? And I said, no. And she said, oh, she's somehow distantly related to this woman who rang me. And she said, oh, I think she was a modern dancer and she was around in Ireland in the 40s. And I was thinking, how come I don't know about that? So this is very fresh. This is very new for me. And I will definitely be wanting to follow it up and find out and learn a bit more about it. So there was some activity with modern dance, albeit not Graham, of course, in Ireland before this, the arrival of Therese Nelson. And so looking at Therese Nelson, so again, I did a search on her and I found that she was born in 1940, but I don't know her death. I don't know where she died. I don't know what happened to her. And here we see a picture of her. Here she is with her husband, and it was in the Judy Marr School of Dance in Philadelphia in the 1940s. Sorry, I beg your pardon, that's not correct. The Judy Marr School of Dance was set up in the 1940s. And this is Therese Nelson with her husband, obviously, 20 years later or something. So apologies about that date, it's not quite correct. So Therese Nelson, she later trained with Martha Graham in New York and latterly forming a regional company, the Therese Nelson Dance Company. She moved to Ireland in 1968 then and set up the Therese Nelson Dance Group at her Monkstown studio in 1973. The first performance took place in St. Mark's Hall, Pearse Street in Dublin in 1975. She taught Graham technique to a pioneering, I'm calling them pioneering for a reason, and I'll say why now, a group of dancers that include Joan Davis, Finola Cronin, Fiona Quilligan, Nadia Quick and Adrienne Brown. And the reason I have, now there were many, many more people who went to Therese Nelson, of course, but the reason, these were the people that I still would know today. And Joan Davis, of course, is very well known, ran Dublin Contemporary Dance Theatre and then went on to, she does her own somatic work at the present time. Finola Cronin went on to dance with Pina Bausch and is working, she's in UCD at the moment, she's the head of the drama department there. Fiona Quilligan, along with her sister Zelda Quilligan, formed their own dance company, Rubato Ballet. Nadia Quick was a very, very well-known dance teacher in Dublin. And then, of course, that's myself, Adrienne Brown. Now, the Therese Nelson Dance Company performed 2 weeks in the Project Arts Centre in 1976. And again, last year, I beg your pardon, this was done in a hurry. It wasn't last year. This is taken from a publication which I was referring to last year. When they choreographed a poem by Brendan Kennelly, Dancing to the Sound of the Poet's Voice. So she was active in the 70s. And here I would like to just, excuse me, I'm just finding another document. So here we just have, this is the actual entry to the one of the performances in the Peacock Theatre, opening night, Sunday, 19th of September, 1976, and a performance by the Therese Nelson Dance Company and the showing of a film entitled Night Journey, performed by the Martha Graham Dance Company. So that tells us that Martha Graham's work was shown in 1976 in Ireland. And so I went to Therese Nelson into her dance studio in Monkstown, and I knew nothing about modern dance or contemporary dance, or nothing at all about Martha Graham. And it was the basement of one of the apartments, an old, very old Georgian house, beautiful Georgian house, with a kind of a double room, which was not set up as a dance studio, but she made it into a dance studio. She had mirrors and she had a wooden floor, but it was quite small. It wasn't very large. And from the moment that I sat down, because it starts with floor work, sitting on the floor, something happened. And from that moment on, I've never been able to let go of Martha Graham, her work and her technique. And it led me on many, many different pathways in my life. But it was that instant. It was an instant moment for me. I think in some respects, the technique suited my body, it suited my temperament, it suited my, just suited my the kind of person I am, which we would discover a little bit more about, as I say, during the afternoon, where we see some more performances and so on. But at this point, I think it would be interesting to see, there's a lovely old, from the RT National Broadcaster Archive, and we'll have a look at this film now. And it comes from 1974, and perhaps we can talk about it then afterwards.
To be a graceful ballerina. That's the dream of most little girls at one time or another, but very few get the opportunity. Those who do become professional dancers retain their youthful figures well into their 40s and 50s, like Dame Margot Fontaine. Well, we can't all be Fontaines, so unless we're madly sporting or keep fit fields, it looks as if a baggy fate awaits us. But there's hope yet. Last week, I discovered an émigré American who offers an attractive alternative, dancer-size. Therese Nelson, you're the teacher. Are you a trained dancer?
Yes. I retired from a 25-year career immediately before coming to Ireland with the Philadelphia Orchestra. I decided I wanted to try something else and to see if I had the talent I thought I had in design and interior decor and furniture design. And I was in Ireland a few years before I came back to dance. And I came back to dance through the pressure of friends and through having been invited to give a lecture at Wesley College. And immediately after the lecture, all the students came up and said, could we have this at our school? And they now do.
And why did you come to Ireland?
If you want me to be totally honest, because what has happened, I saw happening in the United States. I saw the whole society crumbling, and I found daily living there unacceptable. I had a young son of 14, and he was one of the only one of his friends that wasn't on drugs. One could not walk down the streets without being attacked in this marvelous land that has everything, and people had stopped talking to each other. And I found Ireland where people still talk to each other.
Great. Well, I have been having a good response to your classes then.
Magnificent, magnificent. The people have accepted what I brought to them, taken it into themselves deeply. I don't think they do it in a superficial fashion. They're very serious about it.
Your card says, Therese Nelson, dancer size, a unique 6-week course in body conditioning using American modern dance techniques, principles of yoga, isolation, jazz, dynamic movement, and exercise. What does all that mean?
All that means, I guess, a background of all of those years and all of those things. A great deal of the technique is the work of the great genius Martha Graham. I have, of course, changed it and simplified it to suit the purpose of this class. I have not done it on the very, very deep level that one would do if one were training professional dancers.
And what is the purpose of this class?
This class, believe it or not, is not just to keep their bodies in shape, but to get their minds going. There's a concept here. It's not just doing push-ups or push-ups or stand-ups or anything. They're working their bodies, but they're also working their minds.
And how does the mind come into it?
The whole concept of the Graham technique is based on the use of the spine. She literally invented a vocabulary that did not exist. She's now 85, retired from performing only about 2 years ago, is still prolifically choreographing, has a huge company that tours Europe and the United States. There is now a Graham School in Israel under the auspices of Basavi de Rothschild and one in London.
Well, does the mind come into it by the fact that you have to concentrate so hard?
Yes, and that you must acknowledge things about yourself before you can do the technique.
How do you mean?
You have to begin to think in terms of having a center. And that may sound very simple, but if you begin to think about a physical center, pretty soon you find that you've got to think about yourself in your own center.
And is this where the yoga comes into it?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Martha was very deeply influenced by yoga and Zen Buddhism, and a great many of the movements evolved from the basic yoga positions. Of course, they've gone in a totally different direction. They've become stylized until it's an art form rather than a philosophy.
Well, it all looks very easy and sounds very good, but is there really anything in it? How do the women taking the course feel?
Well, I think it affects everything you do. You're walking and you're moving and sitting, standing, everything you do, really.
I enjoy the dancing.
Is it for the dancing alone?
No, well, for figure as well, but mainly for the dancing. It's much more than an ordinary Keep Fit class. It incorporates yoga and dance, quite a lot of other things, and it's more enjoyable.
I lost 1.5 inches off my waist in about 3 weeks without any dieting. I can't think of anything else I've done that's been as good as that.
Well, I find it makes me hold myself much better.
We're so lucky, as all our friends say, to have such a wonderful teacher here, and I love dancing and exercising with my friends.
Therese, as a professional dancer yourself, do you not find it rather frustrating to teach amateurs who generally have no previous experience?
I feel honored to work with them. I feel excited and overjoyed when I see the things happening to them, when I see the moment of somebody working for 6 weeks and understanding the movement with their eyes and not being able to get their body to do it, and then to see that wonderful moment when it happens and you see somebody say, oh, and there it is, it's happened.
So that they lose weight as in a Keep Fit class?
It's not weight. One loses inches rather than weight. The only way you can lose weight is to diet. But no, that would be a lie, an absolute lie and wrong. No, one must discipline oneself for eating if one is going to lose weight. But that does not make a beautiful body. Losing weight, you can still have a very miserable looking body.
So what it actually does is realigns and tones the body.
That, and I think something much more important, I notice, not a criticism please, but an observation, that the ladies of Ireland are very beautiful, but they don't walk beautifully. And here they learn to move. They learn to move beautifully and carry it into their everyday life.
Well, there it is, dancer-size. Much more inviting than a hockey match or a run around the block on a frosty morning. For me, anyway.
So we find from this film, it's so interesting for me. One of the things I find rather fascinating is the way it was marketed and packaged as good for losing weight and getting fit and yoga and so forth. And yes, it's true that Martha Graham was influenced by yoga and by meditation and Zen Buddhism. But I could really sense with Therese Nelson that Ireland at that time didn't have the language, its reporters, they didn't have the kind of understanding of the language of dance to package it any other way. I've experienced this myself many times over my career, where I would have had perhaps a very in-depth interview where you really go into a lot of things for, say, a newspaper article, and then it appears in the paper with some byline like Adrienne Brown gets her dance troupe to go through their moves or something awful like that. So yeah, but I find that a really interesting glimpse back into that time, and that was the world, that's where I found the Graham technique. So Martha Graham, as we will discover, as I say, that she has such a prolific, long career. She was so active as an artist, and I thought about choosing one or two pieces that we could look at. And the next one I would like to show is actually The Rite of Spring from 1984. So it's one of her later pieces. But one of the reasons I chose this was that Martha Graham was often compared to modernist artists like Picasso or Stravinsky, in that she was so famous. She really was a celebrity in her time, and she did change and alter the course of dance, as did others, but she certainly did. And I thought we could have a look at this. Now, the Graham Company only allow you to see snippets of works. They very rarely will show a full, complete work available on YouTube. So we're going to see about 6 minutes of The Rite of Spring. So, as has been said about Martha Graham, she was deeply interested in the human condition. It was the time in the early 20th century of the sudden advance in psychiatry, psychology, and psychoanalysis, and the rise of Freud and Jung and all of these new theorists and new ideas about what makes up the human being. And so she was very drawn to Greek myths, to Americana, to the new world of the American continent. But something about her work that is so known is that it's deeply serious and passionate and engaging. And yet, the next piece I want to show shows a different side to her, which is it's still involved with the deep inner nature of the human being. But this piece we're going to look at is called Satiric Festival Song. It's an earlier piece. It's from 1932. And in this next excerpt, we're going to see Miki Orihara, who was one of the principal dancers that danced with Graham in more latter years. In this case, she's looking at the idea of the satyr. Actually, it came into one of our papers this morning. Somebody was, I don't know if it was Bloss or Maurice and Franck, talking about the animal, the half lion and half snake and half goat, I think it was. So a satyr is not quite the same thing, but it is this primitive kind of half, it's a kind of a less lascivious, lecherous kind of drunken character who upsets everything, and is kind of that the provocative, the usurper in a way, and the one who breaks all boundaries and who doesn't respect boundaries. And that is his purpose. He represents that aspect of life, so a very important part of life. And so I think we might have a little look at this beautiful piece. It's a solo piece, and then we can move on from there. So. So that is the end of the sections that I wanted to show you, the pieces that I wanted to show you. But just to make one final comment, I've gone on to be a choreographer in my own right, in my own life. And while I love Martha Graham's work, and it has been her whole ethos and aesthetic has been a huge influence on me, there's no sense in which I would wish to be a choreographer in the style of Graham, or certainly she had an influence on me, but no one can choreograph in the same way as any other choreographer. One has to find one's own voice. And so that has been part of my journey as a choreographer, to find my own voice. And then there's been a great question in the chat box from Blas Payri, and I'll just answer this as best I can. So Blas asks, how would I describe or characterize Martha Graham's personality type in the Enneagram, as in type 1 or type 4? So if the Enneagram is it's a fascinating system really of deciding about the kind of person you might be based on the numbers 1 to 9. So type 1 is controlled, wrath, principled, self-controlled and perfectionistic, or is a type 4, creative, deep and sensitive, expressive, dramatic, self-absorbed and temperamental. I'm going to go for a 1, Blas, and I think I'm a 1 myself. So maybe it takes one to know one. Put in the chat what you think. I'd be curious to know. Yeah. Okay, that'll be the teaser for the day. Maybe everybody else can put it into the chat box if you think she's a 1 or a 4 or 2, 3, 5, 7, 9. Okay, thank you so much. Yes, he's saying 4. Oh no, Maria Hayes is saying 4 for Martha Graham. Great. Now, yes, so I'd like to now introduce the presentation on Martha Graham from both Rafael Molina and Jean-Baptiste Ferreira.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. It's really good to be here and to have performed in front of you. Thank you, Adrienne and everyone, for making it happen this year. We'll go into starting about principles when we have to teach Graham. And I mean, 2 days ago, it was 30 years after she died, and we were literally babies or very, very young when she died. There was no way we could have directly worked with her. So I think it's even more important for our generation, once we're exposed to that technique and that work, to get down to the fundamentals, the essential, and trying to capture a process that started in the 20s all the way through the late 80s. So I'm going to share something and we'll start talking about it with Jean-Baptiste.
Yes. Okay. So there's actually a lot that our teacher, Therese, said, Adrienne. So I'm just going to build up on that.
Totally go for it, even if I've covered some of these areas, you know.
It's so the technique was built on the concept of breathing in and breathing out. So it's really based on the breath, and through time, over time, it evolved, and that's when we started to see contraction and release happening. There's just one thing about contraction and release that to me, I feel like there's a confusion sometimes. It's, I see it more like contraction to me is gathering of energy more than contraction of the muscle, and release is then release the energy in the entire body. So it's really that inward, outward action that happens instead of just contracting a muscle and just releasing it. Yeah, especially when you translate it into different languages, sometimes that gets lost in translation, I feel. And then the second principle of the technique, the dance, the Graham dance, is the spiral. That is also, if I were to use an image for that, it's in the body. It's like if you were wringing the towel somehow, you know. And the further you go into the spiral, the more energy collects around the spine, around the core. And then the more you go, the more energy you're going to be able to release the other way. So that's, to me, that's how I perceive the spiral. I don't know if you have anything to say.
I think it's interesting that it's so famous and everyone's like obsessed. When you start teaching people, their obsession is my contraction right? Like, is it deep enough? And yes, it's great. Work contraction releasing grab. I mean, we all love it. That's why we do it. But the spiral is everywhere. You dance, even once you start doing ballet, practicing, which is there, you do a spiral. When you walk, when you do ballet. But I think that principle is so fundamental to grab and help in many techniques, but somehow it got a little pushed away by this so famous contraction. Yeah, so I feel like it's more transversal when you work with people who might not want to do a lot of gram. If you work on spiral, it's really something you can apply much more than the contraction. The gram contraction is so specific. In jazz, it's a whole other contraction. And, it's very rare to kind of see people in the street doing that type of contraction, though the spiral in that spine and, and in trees and everywhere, you kind of see it everywhere, that spiral.
Yeah. Moving on to the next one. So the next one would be, as opposed to ballet, for example, there's a lot of moments in the class, in a ballet class, when like the goal would be to stay in balance. For turns, there are a lot of balances all through the class, basically, in ballet. And that never really happens. So you're always moving, and it never stays still completely. And so that's what do you call it? You either, yeah, so from the off balance, the idea of off balance can lead to a shift of weight. So from one foot to the other, or from one part of the body to the other. Like if you're on the floor, maybe from one hip to the hand or to the elbow. So it's really broad. The different kinds of shifts of weight that can happen. And the ultimate off balance is, of course, the fall. There are so many different falls from the floor, from standing position, even from a jump. Sometimes you can jump in the air, and then the next second you'll be falling off on the floor. Yeah, and I feel like the common element to all these principles is always the opposition in the body. For example, if you observe the contraction and the release, the more you want to release, the more you want to open. If you want to go in an arch, you have to feel the opposition. You have to feel it's like there's something pulling you. The more you want to go out, there's still something that's pulling you down to the ground, and vice versa. When you contract, there's always an opposition. There's always a sense of openness. So it's like a thread that's always some sort of tension all the time, from in and out, inward and outward. That's how I see it. That's how I feel it in my body. So it's really rare that the energy completely vanishes in the air, in gram. There's always tension, and I feel like this is also why it is so dramatic and powerful. Yeah. Would you like to add up?
Maybe because we're talking about the technical principles, so really the body and physically what's going on, and that's something obviously dancers practice a lot. But if you get really interested in where it comes from, and it's been really theorized, not necessarily by Martha Graham herself, by other people, the philosophy behind it, and then all those physical principles actually come from principles in terms of philosophy, and it's not neutral. Like, well, sometimes like ballet in France almost appears neutral. You know, there's still this myth that you can study ballet and that's the technique for everything, which becomes weird today, especially for hip hop, because I don't see how a ballet class will help you doing some hip hop moves. But and Graham, everyone thinks it's so weird, so specific, etc. But ballet does have philosophy behind it, and in you know, Graham, it's from the 20th century, and so it's, I think it's good to be aware of that and to know, okay, this is not, you know, it doesn't apply to everything. It's very specific. So for example, that constant tension and how you use the energy in Graham, obviously when you had postmodern and some contemporary artists, they wanted to get rid of that. They didn't even want trained artists. They just wanted a body to walk on stage. And that was fascinating. And that was great, right? So we can, maybe we'll talk a little bit about those philosophical principles, because they really go hand in hand with what's physically happening in the body. Do you want to talk about some of them, Jean-Baptiste? So maybe I'll just, at the end, I put myth of the Graham technique. So that's really interesting for me. We'll talk later about the research I've done studying the Graham educational practices in 5 different countries and throughout time. I didn't travel through time, but I interviewed people who lived those, you know, those years and went through archives. But there is, everyone thinks we're talking about the same thing, the Graham technique, and there's one Graham technique, and everyone knows what it is, and everyone, you know, is teaching that and will not touch that because it's the Graham technique. And obviously, it's a myth. It was always evolving with Martha Graham while she was alive. It was always evolving in different space times. She had so many different interests. The bodies and the society changed radically from the 30s all the way to the 80s. And now we're 2021 and the world is completely crazy. And like, there's no way that technique has not changed. So maybe later we'll go into details, but that's why we want to talk about the principles and the fundamentals, because those remained, but that doesn't mean that, like in terms of style or aesthetic or the focus, where the focus was, or the physicality of dancers, sometimes when you had very ballet trained dancers coming from Juilliard, obviously it changed, but those principles remained, underlined the work and remained what helps you know, okay, what is this Graham technique?
So there's, let's just talk about the meaning.
I can't hear him.
I'm pretty new to Zoom. I'm sorry about that. So yeah, let's talk about the philosophical principles. So the meaning of each movement is something that you focus on in the daily practice, and to me, it's really about our research and introspection. As I think we saw something about that in the short clip with Tara's students. Sorry. So Graham's not just about moving around. It's not just a fitness class, and it's not just a dance class. Also, in a way that if you really want the full experience, then you have to really dig in deep within yourself and get to know yourself. Use your emotional state, your emotional background, all your life experiences everything that makes you who you are. What do you believe in? Who do you love? What do you love? Everything that makes you who you are. And so then you can, and you can truly decide how to make a movement, a particular movement yours, and do it in your way so that it's 100% you. And that doesn't really disconnect to the technical aspect of the technique and the training in the class. Yeah, Rafael, is there something you?
Yes. Maybe quickly, when you discover gram technique and you come from, let's say, like me, a conservatory, we had ballet and French contemporary dance, you get exposed to gram and it's completely different. There is, first of all, it's theatrical right away from the class. It's a ritual and you feel like you're on stage, and the teachers are always passionate. You never have a teacher that's not completely passionate and crazy about gram, and but in a way it puts you in a trance, right? You get right away into that crazy mode, and that's great because you have 1 hour and a half to train and a few classes a week, and hopefully soon you're on stage or you get something from it. So that physicality is great, and also you feel right away that it's about you and the individual. That was the whole purpose. And so there's no way you're going to ever copy the teacher or try to be someone else. Like, that's made very clear to you from the top. You have to understand what's there in the exercise. You have to make it yours. And you connect to something bigger, so you can, obviously, coming from the different themes she worked on for her pieces, it can be, universal themes, but it can also come from something more animalistic that you have in you, or some sense of spirituality that you see in class, so that you kind of feel, and I think we'll go to that, the history behind it and how the technique was created, and it's very different. Again, let's take ballet because a lot of people know ballet. The birth of ballet as a technique has nothing to do with the birth of gram as a technique. What's similar, though, is that both were codified. Gram became really codified. And then at the end of the process, it kind of looks the same in terms of they are exercises. There's an order. You do exercises. You wear a unitard, or in ballet, you punch, like there's kind of this thing, but where it comes from really changes the practice you're going to do. So I think we'll move to that, and I'll stop sharing. Jean-Baptiste, do you want to start talking a little bit about the history and maybe the connection with the whole modern dance revolution, the connection between the emotion and the movement? Oh, you want to talk about that first, or you? Okay.
He's muted.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I'm back. So talking about how it became a technique. Martha Graham never really wanted to be a dance teacher and create a technique and have people go to her class and learn her moves. She was a dancer. She was a performer, and she wanted to have her, first there were some solos, but then she had a group of women training with her. And so that's how slowly she was looking for a new way of moving. And she was in all that quest of what is an American dance form, and how can we move differently. And so she started to choreograph. And while she was choreographing, obviously, in order for people to do what she was doing, and even for her to find her choreography, then she started to train people. And there was always this link that the classroom was a place where she could experiment and discover, create new things. And then that would be used as a vocabulary to her pieces. And then once her pieces were on stage and the dancers were performing that, then somehow it went back from the stage and the repertoire to exercises, sequences. And so there was always this back and forth between the classroom as an experiment and the repertoire as something that would remain. But for a long time, even though it started to get codified, she would change the exercises, sequences. She would keep something, change something, or even aesthetically sometimes. She was, I mean, that's the difference between someone who wants to set up a technique and someone who's just choreographing, creating, inspired. The world is changing, her interests change. So obviously then even the sequences would change, and the way she would organize the class was always according to what she was working on as a choreographer. And when you arrive to the 40s and the 50s, there were men in the company. They were soloists, so not just Martha Graham and a group of women. There was a company with people being soloists. And at that moment, those people were the core of that world. They were performing with her on stage. They were sometimes co-creating the role, especially men, because she didn't have a male body, and she would ask them to create things and then would rearrange. So they were co-creating those roles. And they were teaching at school, demonstrating for her, teaching at school, and then send to different places, like Juilliard or neighborhood playhouse. And so they were teaching what Martha Graham was doing. That's how it started. You know, she was creating, doing something, and then sometimes they would even put the counts themselves or tell other people who were in the room when she did a new variation to tell them, okay, now we're teaching that. So it was a whole, you know, like a creative process and a whole big, you know, movement. Like it was really like a bubbling, you know, you have something, it's cooking and it's changing all the time. It's not in the fridge yet, you know, it's not getting. And obviously then you get into that a little bit because she stopped performing on stage and she was not always around. Like she was alive and she was coming and she was teaching a lot, but more and more in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you might have people who were not directly trained by her. And then you go from something that was codified to something that is really institutionalized. And then the ballet training kind of was incorporated some of the aesthetic of ballet and also some of the turnout, more, you know, more the legs up, even the traditional leaps that with the counts down sometimes started to be done with the counts up in the 80s, like in ballet, because she was working also with ballet dancer as guests. So there was a huge, you know, a huge evolution, but that bond, when she was alive, that bond between the choreography and the pedagogy was always there. And even when she was alive, and sometimes the teachers will, you know, come together to kind of, you know, if everyone was going to a different direction, they wanted to like make sure everyone knew what it was. Sometimes it was just impossible because it's dance, it's movement. She's inspired by different things. And also she might not even remember, or she might change something. So if there's one person that decides for something, you know, and it's just her intuition or her new, you know, moment, because you don't know what's going on. So it's really not something that was ever set where you could, for example, record all the exercises and then put it on DVD and then let people watch the DVD. Obviously, it was very alive, and I think it's happening for a lot of technique. But for Graham, that's part of the DNA, that evolutionary aspect, and the fact that you always have to see how it's performed on stage today, how it's people still make it relevant, and that's gonna, you know, as a mirror, that's going to have an impact on the training because the people are getting trained to go on stage and to use it. So that's really a big difference. Maybe we can talk about the different influences. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so her creation took place in like almost the entire 20th century, and most of it happened in New York, and it was a big scene of the modern art in general. And she cooperated with very well-known composers, music composers. Of course, we know her favorite set designer is Isamu Noguchi. Like almost all her pieces were designed by him. And isn't there a museum in New York that you can actually visit and see his work that is not entirely dedicated to stage sets, but I think he was also a painter, probably sculpture also. Yeah, and yeah, I think I can think also of, I know she was training actors at an early stage, and there was the actor studio in that developed in that area as well, in that era and area. And that's interesting because there are actually very similar principles between the Graham dance, the Graham technique, and the way that this training for actors was made. So that's an interesting link. I don't know how. Was she aware of that? What was it conscious? How did it happen? Or I don't know. But that's something I noticed also doing some research about her and interpretation in dance. Yeah, and also I guess I could mention also fashion designers such as Calvin Klein. I'm not sure he is American, but I know he designed costumes for her. Yeah, so that's mostly her and her company being in the same place as a lot of different artists from different art forms in that time when she was alive and creating pieces. Yeah, if you want to add up to that.
Yeah, I feel like the image we have of Martha Graham is really this legend where she's famous, invited to the White House, sent abroad by the American government to promote American values, So that's something we all have in mind. And when you go and study in New York, obviously that's very clear. But more interesting is the early Martha Graham. Like, how come she ended up doing that contraction release and taking those yoga thing and then making it into, sequences that you've never seen, or that. And it's really a mix of different things. When she started at the Denishawn School in the West Coast, she had the principles of Descartes. So what theoretically created the modern dance and the modern dance in Europe, German modern dance, this quest of what's the relationship between emotion and movement, that was taught there. You also had Louis Horst, who was the music director at the Denishawn, and Louis Horst then became the mentor of Graham and her composer, but he had studied and read and knew all the artistic movements that were going on in Europe, and he was reading German, and he studied pre-classical composition methods in music and started to apply it to dance and help dancers have tools to create. They were influenced at the Denishawn. They were doing what is called exotic dancing, but they were influenced by yoga and that Oriental philosophy. But Ted Schoen was also observing Native Americans and taking also from that. And that's something Martha Graham would do later. The rituals and the rhythm and the way they use, the parallel and the floor and all that. And then you really had exchanges between the German modern dance that came, like again, Louis Horst had read and knew about Laban, what Laban was doing in Wigman, but in the United States, you had people like Anya Holmes who had worked with Wigman, And Graham, that was an interesting choice. She did not accept a Guggenheim grant to go and study in Europe with Wigman, because she really wanted to find this American dance form, and she didn't want to be too much influenced. I mean, obviously there was the tradition of ballet imported to the US, but she really wanted to know what is that American dance. And you have even influences that I discovered later because it's not that famous. She worked with that Japanese dancer, Mikio Ito, and some of the energy used inside the pelvis, that's coming from martial arts, and that's, again, coming from Asia. And of course, you had the influence also of coming from Europe, this psychology, Freud and Jung. So there was this huge, this huge moment, all these things were happening, and she was definitely not the only one. There were other people working, experimenting things, and she's one of, she remains today really famous. But what is Martha Graham without Ted Chan and Ruth Dennis, Louis Horst, even Doris Humphrey, who was doing something else, but it was the same time, again, Jean-Baptiste was mentioning actor studio method being, happening at that time. So there was, there was a huge need for a new way of seeing art, what modernity would mean for dance. And there was also, there was a lot of commercial dance happening, in New York, I mean, everywhere, entertainment. And Graham and other people like Humphrey didn't want to have anything to do with that. They wanted that artistic art form, and they wanted to find, to find something that was special and that would help them claim, the title of American dance. And the New York Times critic, John Martin, really helped actually with what he wrote, the different reviews he theorized, and helped this generation become what was then called American modern dance. And maybe I'll share also again the PowerPoint here and talk about where Graham as a training went. So that's something, when I started this research on Graham educational practices, I had to choose places, right? The most places, of course, you had New York, where he was born, and you have different places that were very important. But then it was brought to Israel through Batsheva de Rothschild, who financed the Graham Company in New York, and then started to go more and more to Israel and wanted a dance company to start in Israel, and she asked Martha Graham to be the artistic advisor. And so for more than 1 decade, the Batsheva company was a repertory company, but they were doing the Graham repertory along with other dances, but they were training Graham. And today it's really hard to know. If you go to Israel, obviously everyone talks about Gaga technique, and Ohad Naharin was the director of Batsheva. But in Israel, it was not, from what I understood going there and talking to people, it was not as formalized, institutionalized as in New York. And it was still like in New York at the beginning, in that moment of those dancers were not professional dancers yet. So they started to get trained. They were immigrants coming from different parts of the world. Some of them had studied with Graham in New York, but some didn't know. And there was no big dance company in Israel. So it was this new thing. And Graham was really used. The Graham repertory and the Graham language was used, but not necessarily to be like the Graham company, but just to start and then just like go wherever it was going. So kind of naturally it changed, evolved. And yeah, today it's barely taught, Graham, and even Israeli dancer might not even know the connection between the Batsheva Dance Company and Martha Graham, although it was almost the second Graham company for more than 1 decade. And Martha Graham created a piece just for them. She has never done that for any other company. And she was personally going. There were other people going regularly to teach, to train, and to make sure the repertory was performed like it should be, but she was really personally involved. The other big place was London in the UK. That was a different thing because it was Robin Howard invested, he believed in the Graham works, he invested a lot of money in the UK. but it was through Robert Cohen that it was brought. So it was one stream. Once Robert Cohen got to the UK and started to work with the London Contemporary Dance Theatre and with the school called The Place, he started to do his thing. So it was still Graham, very clear, but he called it, after a few years, the Cohen method, and he really was clear with, he was using it for his choreography, he was using it in his classes to train professionals in the UK, so that's not like New York. And so it's really one stream of Graham, and you can see it today if you go to the UK and see people coming from that stream. It's a little bit different from what you might see in New York, because in New York, it remains the mother place, and in a way it's more conservative, and it's changing, of course, because it can't stop, but it's constantly trying to be, again, what I call the Graham technique. But in the UK, the same thing as Israel. Then it evaporated or changed because director would change, and so today you might not find it so much. Then I went to Lausanne because the Béjar school always had Graham. They had it among other techniques, but in '93, Béjar had decided that he wanted everyday Graham and ballet being the two important heads for that training. And very interesting to see, a little bit similar to Juilliard, although Juilliard is in New York, but it's a very prestigious institution, and they train in Graham and they have an amazing level. But the fact that they're not in the Graham school or Graham company, and that they're not really Graham dancers in a way, creates something really different in their bodies and the way they will train in Graham and perform in class. And then I studied Paris only because I'm from here, from France, and because ironically, it was very rejected in France, Graham, but today it's the place in Europe where you have the most Graham training. And it's taught at the Paris Opera School, and it's taught at the High Conservatory in Paris, and it's taught in many dance professional schools, mostly jazz, actually, jazz professional schools in Paris. And so what was interesting to me is seeing that diversity, going to talk to all these people and trying to understand, so how do you translate what is done in New York in that very dynamic place where you have the Graham company, where the repertoire and the technique are always, in dialogue. Once you transpose it to another country, and once you might have different goals than preparing dancers to enter the company, or maybe to go to Graham-based company like you have in New York, how can it be relevant, and how can people use it, and in which direction does it go? And so that was really interesting. I'm just going to show all the people I interviewed because I love seeing faces. We'll hear a little bit later some of the voices, the people from New York. So that was, for an entire year that I went to those different places and talked to those people. And I have a few images also from archives. This is Diversion of Angels performed by the Batsheva Dance Company. Then we have Martha Graham teaching herself, but also Ethel Winter, who was teaching for a long time at Juilliard, from that generation, the 40s, 50s, who were part of that core group who worked with Graham. Here we see American Document, but very early in the 30s, and you can see that's a beautiful picture by Barbara Morgan, and you can see how we're in that time where it's kind of fresh in a way, and it's trying to find, it's like it's questioning kind of. And then you see very, much later, Baryshnikov, who as a guest would come and perform with Graham. And so to me, that really represents when it's more institutionalized, and when Graham, of course, is not creating with her body, and is already kind of a legend in the dance world. That's also her teaching in the 60s. And then on the right, it's her posing with the Graham company again, like in action teaching the 60s, and then that moment where she's popular and she might be in the media, and she was that star. She was a star, and everyone, you know, in America knew Martha Graham. All right. So maybe we can talk about now the repertoire, and Jean-Baptiste, we might start with you. If we can see the solo. Yeah.
Okay, so that was actually two solos combined from the piece Embattled Garden from 1958. So the character is Adam. It's a piece based on, it does not exactly follows the stories of Adam and Eve, but it's inspired from it. Just going to talk about the characters briefly. So there's Adam and Eve and Lilith and the snake. Lilith, for those who don't know who she is, she was the first wife of Adam, and she the story is she was not mentioned in the Bible. She came up later on in medieval times in different cultures, stories, in various art forms. But the story is that she rebelled against Adam and God's domination, because she was claiming for more power, and she did not get that. So instead, she decided to just go away, basically. So she's to me, she's the ringleader in the story. She's the most important character, and she's the one pulling the strings. And Adam, so the character that you just saw, he is more, he's kind of playing the victim in a way. All the bad things that happened to him are not his fault. He's losing Eve, and it's, yeah, nothing is his fault or his responsibility. And so he's got that kind of vain attitude and pride to him. So that's what's happening in the first half of the solo. He just realizes that he's losing Eve, and he just can't believe what's happening. And you can see all those self-inflicting punishment-like gestures, all the hitting himself, and oh my God kind of gestures. And then he faints, and it's the other half of the solo, which is more ambiguous, I think, because that's the part of the piece where tension is building between him and Eve, and that later turns into a fight. And he's also cursing at Lilith and the snake. You can see all those gestures that performing, we actually verbalize those actions. We actually speak to ourselves as we do these gestures. And so it's really like talking to each other as we dance. And yeah, but there's still I think there's still hope at the end, because even though all of this is happening, he still hopes for the best for him and Eve. And there's at the end we don't see it, but the very last movement, him and Eve are holding each other's in their arms, and when he falls to the floor, the final gestures is towards her, towards Eve. And yeah, the entire last part of the piece is just about fighting and finding compromises and trying to make up, basically, and evolve and grow from a tragedy, kind of. Yeah. Let's move on. That's it. Yeah. So if we could see the second solo, the solo from Rafael. Yeah.
Okay, so that was from Dark Meadow. Just so everyone knows, we didn't use the original music because there's copyright. Um, and also for me, I'm going to speak for myself, it's really my own interpretation a few years after performing the Graham repertoire there in New York, etc., because my body changes, my experience has changed. And in terms of timing and the interpretation, I took some freedom. Dark Meadow, I chose that solo for this week. I mean, it's a piece from the 40s and it's about connecting to oneself and to the community. And I think with what's happening in the world, obviously I've thought of this piece. It's the role of the one who summons. Talking about the Graham rep in general, everyone has to realize that the best solos are usually women solos because that was the center of Graham's work. And a lot of solos actually originally were dance performed by her. And so that's a really interesting thing that some of the most caricatural roles are men's role, right? But some female roles are absolutely amazing in the center of attention. Also the work of embodying a character. I wouldn't say that we've been necessarily trained specifically at the school. It's something you kind of have to do on your own. I had done some theater before, and it's a very specific work. I would say in general in dance, when you embody characters, you have to do that. But in Graham, it's very, very important because sometimes the steps are really not going to help you. If you just rely on the steps, it's going to get very boring very easily. And you don't have like, sometimes it's athletic, sometimes it's not that athletic. And if you don't bring something from you and embody something, you're missing the whole thing. To conclude today, I wanted to talk about the future of Graham, right? 30 years after she died. And I think that's really important to remember that the Graham work is very rich and there's a lot of diversity within that work. You know, it's like, it's this thing and different people see it from a different angle. That's why I was really happy to do my research and to kind of collect testimonies of different Graham teachers to know how they have taught and if it was fruitful and what they think of that work. I was very surprised to see how the philosophy behind the practice is still very present and they're very clear with what they're trying to do and what they want to do and why they do it. And I have to say, for me, in creating Graham for Europe, this platform and working with my colleagues in Europe, I really love taking freedom. And I think it's a risk that because Martha Graham is that legend and is this huge master and a lot of people learn from her, that we get stuck. And I really don't want that to happen. I think it's very important that we are not conservative and that we open, you know, we open the practice to more people, we democratize it, and that we kind of see that, yes, it's been codified, yes, it's been institutionalized, but it's a process, it's not a product. If we use it as a product, I don't think it's going to survive, right? But if we keep it as a process for ourselves, for the people we're teaching, I mean, I love it. Jean-Baptiste loves it. And a lot of students think they hate it the first weeks, but then they get caught and they're hooked and they love it. And then they end up 2 years after at the New York, you know, Martha Graham School, and they don't even know how that happened. And I would say, I get that some people don't like it, and actually, who cares? Like, we all have different, you know, different tastes and different sensitivities. But for sure, if you love dance, Martha Graham was such a big, you know, influence on contemporary dance, and to physically not experience that and to kind of go beyond the exercises at what you see and kind of understanding how she became revolutionary and why so many people went to work with her. That's I mean, that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rafael and Jean-Baptiste. That was really wonderful. Yes, sorry, I was just checking to see. After a week of trying to maneuver this strange television studio or something in my room and these guys in their television studio, at times I get it so wrong. Anyway, so I just for a moment I panicked. I thought, I'm not even sure if I'm on. But I wanted to, Hannah, first of all, apologies I didn't introduce our Hannah, who has been feeding the chat box to us. Hannah, I think there may be a very interesting question there. I haven't got my glasses, but well, maybe if I put my glass on, it's probably simpler, isn't it? I just think it might be relevant to what you've just said, Rafael. So Blas is asking, how would you describe the Graham style to build long phrases, changing from one corporal state to another? Is it different from other dance styles? Just thought if you could maybe describe in some way. I don't know if you understand. From what I understand, it's like the long phrases of Graham. How does she build phrases that change from one stage to another? And is that different to other styles?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand what he means.
I know. Yeah. So apologies, Blas. I hope I'm doing justice to your question. I think from what I understand about that question is when we see large phrases of Graham, what are the distinguishing features in terms of how those phrases alter groups of steps? Oh gosh, that's not even well described. I think it's really just to describe the bigger phrases of Graham in comparison with other styles such as ballet. I think it might be just to do with those core principles, actually. The center, finding the center, the spiral, the shift of weight, that kind of thing, maybe.
Oh yeah, did we mention the different aesthetics? Maybe I don't know if that relates to that question. Yeah, I'm sorry. Do you want to?
One thing comes to my mind is the fact that yes, there's a vocabulary, right? Once it's been codified, you will recognize from one choreography to the other, oh, there's a pitch turn, you know, just like in ballet, you might have grand shtick, etc. So you see steps that are part of the vocabulary and they're arranged differently, right? But how you work on a Graham phrase is not really by doing that. You have to do the internal work and connecting them, and that brings you to the steps and to the fact that one step goes to the other. But it's all about the transitions, and a step in itself in Graham is not really a thing. I mean, it doesn't express anything. You know, it's like a letter in the alphabet. If you have this letter and you just repeat this letter, or you put the letter after another letter, but you don't know what you're trying to say, it doesn't. So maybe that's how I see it very different from other dance styles, that the physical part of the Graham work in itself is not important. It's how you get to that. It's the transition between the steps, and it's what emotional state or what visualization brought you to those steps. And so that's a clear difference in terms of quality, because the audience does not really see someone with the intention of performing step, sees someone experiencing something and then is really moved, like from the inside.
Yes. Once again, I just want to thank you so much, and stand by, because we will be shortly going to, I wish to introduce Mathilde No. And following Mathilde's presentation, we may have a little conversation back and forth about what we've been hearing. So very pleased to introduce Mathilde. Lovely. So Mathilde is a videographer, and her approach combines dance, study of behavior, cinema, and sociology. It crosses perception, performance, body language, a continuum necessary in order to capture the momentum. She studied cinema in Paris, then in Sydney, Australia, and she studied sociology at the Sorbonne. She's a lecturer and she's a teaching institute assistant, I beg your pardon. And over to you, Mathilde.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad to learn so much about the world of Martha Graham also. So thank you very much, Rafael and Jean-Baptiste. The film I made is a bit in parallel, if I may, because it's an encounter, because I didn't actually know the technique, either the work of Martha Graham. So I feel it's better to watch it first and to talk about it a little just afterwards, just to explain a bit the approach and what brought my journey to New York at that time.
So I'm happy to welcome Mathilde to know, and perhaps Mathilde, you'd like to tell us a little bit about the process of this film.
I'd love to just to make you understand a bit what you've watched. It's a bit different as a Martha Graham piece because it's another level, if I may, because just to put in context a bit, it was during my study at the Sorbonne in Paris. I was studying sociology, and I had to actually study a group for 1 month. And I was at the time working on some video dance. I always had this on another side. And thanks to Marisa Hayes, I had the chance to meet Virginie Messen, which is director of Graham at the Martha Graham School. So I spent a month there just following all the time the Graham 2, so in 2019. And each day I had this daily routine to come at class at the 55th Bitham Street and to just follow, understand, watch, meet. I was interviewing the dancers of Graham too. I was eating with them, just spending my month with them, and I had a lot of time to write. And I think this position made me take a new place that they are not usually allowed, or they don't have the habit to have somebody watching all the trainings. And I was just having a connection, a special place that I needed to go further. And I just took cameras, different cameras. My idea is not to put too much effort on aesthetics, on the image maker in a sense, but just to show what dance can bring into the screen. So I don't have the talent, or I think anybody can actually take the dance to the screen, to a film, and the same level. So you have to put it somewhere else, and then happens another project. And in this way, I feel in this video you can feel what brought me to understand the Martha Graham technique, and all the work all the dancers made and all the time. So the result is actually my point of view and my exchange with them at that time. And as you can hear, the music is a bit different also, because I gave that to a music composer, Isaac Magner, a British composer, and in that way he had the chance to give also his point of view and what he felt about this encounter between a screen and him, about all this beautiful movement that brings something else. I called it hypnosis, because it just like gets you, and you're just like brought to the sensitivity of the movement, and it's just so beautiful to have the chance to see it with your eyes. You want to share the experience. So I feel this film is how I want to share the experience more than the dance itself. It's the way to I'm trying to catch what brings the feeling of being the audience, and also the actor, because when you're the audience, you're also there, so you have an impact on the dance every time you're here. So yeah, that's a 1 month daily routine of a group of dancers at the Martha Graham School, and I feel I'm really lucky to have followed them for this whole time, and I really want to thank them all for all the generosity and how they can bring the technique to this beauty. And that's my way of translating it. So I hope that this gives you a bit of hints of the result, and I hope you enjoyed it.
I certainly did. I find it hypnotic, as you say. One of the things when I watched it first that really struck me was how the music carried me really in this very hypnotic kind of journey. Mm-hmm. But I want to open up the conversation generally to everybody, but I would just like to ask you, what was your assignment, your sociology assignment? I'm just curious as to what were your parameters apart from just hanging out and living with them?
Yeah. Well, the first step as a study in sociology is just to incarnate the observer. So you can be a participant, but also just fully observer. In this case, I was participant observer. And the idea is just to transcribe as much as possible all the details of the interaction, how the things are scheduled, how people interact, how do they talk, how do they what do they wear, what are the common words they use, any kind of, all that can structure something that is not it's never objective, but trying to be just literal on what's happening. So it's something that happens in any group of people. Sociology is just made when you're more than one, and even when you're one, you're not only. So there's always interaction with sociology, and the idea is that, well, the idea was to try to tell more about a group of dancers, and in this case students in learning a special technique and behaving together for at least 2 years or even more. So that was, yes, there was not an end to this. I think it's an open study, and it's not finished, but it was the start of it. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. I'm glad to hear there's going to be more. I would like to ask, would anybody like to ask questions? Emer, perhaps, or anybody. I'm just noticing, Emer, that you're invited in, and you may have something you'd like to ask for any of the talkers. So we've had, of course, myself, Jean-Baptiste, Rafael, and Mathilde. If anybody would like to.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I have some comments after getting to experience all of those presentations and also the performances. and they were just wonderful. And also even to see just the amount of content as well, it's given me a lot more insight into Martha Graham. And so that's been really interesting. And I think, yeah, my question, I suppose, is to Jean-Baptiste and to Rafael, just in terms of, you spoke a lot about, you know, Martha Graham's, the technique in itself, and also kind of how each teacher is so dedicated and passionate, and then that can kind of really help you as a student to engage with that process. And I suppose it's just to kind of in and around, I suppose, looking at how you are when you teach and when you deliver, and even looking back to Therese Nelson, Adrienne, who you spoke about, you know, even in that clip from RTE, it really came across her passion and her dedication, and also the care for her students, where she really, you know, she said she would simplify or adapt certain movements for, you know, the capabilities of the students that she would be working with. And I suppose I'd like to ask Rafael and Jean-Baptiste, is this something that you feel as, you know, teachers going forward in teaching practice, that you will continue to do and to carry this with you? Or would it be that you would kind of prefer to only work with people who are in the Martha Graham School, you know, in New York? So I'm just interested in hearing that, I suppose. And also you'd mentioned that you worked, Martha Graham, with actors. And I suppose, is that anything that would be of interest to you also going forward in your careers?
Yeah, so I'm going to speak for the both of us to start. I think, well, Rafael's approach is questioning a lot of current practices in Graham, I guess. So, and that's basically what Therese did. I think that's what she said. She said she would simplify, she would rearrange the sequences to make it more affordable, accessible to her students. And that's, I guess that's what we have to do, because, well, the thing is, most of the dancers, most of the students that we have to teach now, they don't want to be Graham dancers. They that's not their goal. So we have to really, I guess we have to really go back to the essence of what Graham is, to make it meaningful for them, so that they have something to take from it, so that it just, you know, it doesn't make sense for us to teach them as if they were training to get into the company next month. Yeah, so that's basically, yeah. Do you want to add something?
Yeah. Yes. I had a lot of Graham teachers I absolutely loved. I loved their passion, I loved their generosity, and I loved because they were so dedicated to that legacy that they would show things if they needed to show. They would stop the class and go into something that other people might think is a detail, but it's not a detail, because something that is small actually reflects that you understand the whole system behind it and the philosophy and the principles. So in a way, I'm very grateful that I had that, because before I was kind of lost. I didn't want to do ballet. Contemporary was so unclear to me what I could do as a training, and on stage I could do pretty much anything, but I didn't have really a direction. So I guess that's something important to keep, to know why you're doing this practice. And even if you adapt it and you don't do it in a traditional way or orthodox way, you are clear with the principles and you know why you wake up, why you go to the studio, and what the people in front of you can do with it. And I think what changed the world, I mean, thanks to Graham, is that it was empowering. She was empowering people. She was helping them find their own voice within that work, and she was featuring them artistically. And so if you get into that school setting, I have students, they need to do that for the exam, or they want to be good, they need to look good, or you're losing the whole purpose of artistry and of that, the quest we're talking about that she was having. We all have a different quest, right? Like we all have different reason that brought us to the work. And somehow the resources that we can find today to help that legacy go forward might not be within the Graham world, because Graham was not being inspired by what was already happening in the Graham world. You know, Graham was not like the people after Graham were more Graham than Graham herself. Graham was getting inspired by things that were outside, that she was grabbing. So if after her, we want to keep the Graham legacy, but we only stay within what was already created, then there is that exchange is being lost. And so, for example, personally, to respond to the question about actors, there is still, in New York at the Neighborhood Playhouse, there is still Kristen Dakin teaching to actors in the tradition of having a Graham teacher for them, but it's something I'd like to do in France. I really like to, not just because I want to bring actors something, but because actors can bring me something. And that's how Martha Graham developed all this imagery and the metaphors, because once she was teaching to actors, she could not ask them to do physically the thing because they were not trained physically like dancers. So there is a lot to get from adapting the training and teaching to other people. And sometimes I'll finish with that. Sometimes I think that if I do not see the purpose anymore, I will stop. I will stop and I will do something else, because I love Graham, but I love other things. And so if you still know why, again, why you're waking up, why you're going to the studio, and that you make sure you're doing it for the people in front of you and not for your ego, or because somehow you love it and you don't want to ask the question if it's relevant, and that's all you know, that's all you want to do. You know, I think it's just, and I don't think there's a lot of people like that, but I think the students need to know that. Need to know, you need to express it clearly. That they're the center of attention, them, the future, like the present and the future, and that's what you're working for, not necessarily, you know, again, to be the most Graham you want to be, you have to ungram a little bit yourself, and then you're even more Graham than before. Somehow, that's how I would sum it up.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that.
Can I ask? Oh, sorry, Marissa, were you going to say something?
Go ahead. That's fine.
No, well, I was gonna ask kind of, I thought it was really interesting what you were saying about democratizing the technique and not having it be a product. And I feel like some people, some purists would find that, not that I'm one of those, but that they would find that very controversial, because you think about these kind of sacred techniques, and Graham would be included in those, and people get very protective. And you even look at like Bob Fosse or Balanchine is probably the biggest one that people think of. And you have these legacies and these foundations and these trusts set up. And even within companies, you have repetitors that their job is to make sure that this choreography and these techniques are preserved exactly as they were meant to be. So I guess I'm just wondering, would you be concerned about if it's more democratized, if it is opened up to people's own interpretation, about a dilution of the technique, and then eventually kind of it being lost or morphed into something that it wasn't originally? Or is that okay? Is that just, the nature of art and what it should be? Sorry, I know it's like a heavy question to ask.
Yes, no, that's...
Let me just say something quickly. Yeah.
Adrienne, you want...
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me okay? Sorry, guys. Internet connection's unstable. Can you hear me now? Yeah. No, I just wanted to say in relation to that question, Hannah, I remember when what's his name, Eric Hawkins, her husband, when they split up and he went on to form his own technique, and he made kind of comments like, well, Graham was too this and she was too that. So in a way, I'm going to soften it down a bit. So I'm paraphrasing and I'm probably not doing him justice, but I think that would be the negative side of what you just said, Hannah. In other words, if you take all the harsh bits and all the grueling bits out of it and just make it a bit easier, it'll be more palatable for people. So I know that's not what you're asking, or that's not what the question is, but that could be a possible danger. That's what I would say. But I'm sure Jean-Baptiste and Rafael might like to take that further.
That's a very interesting question. It's really the core of my research and kind of the whole reason why I started, because I had many questions about pure pedagogy and I didn't have answers. I didn't know how people adapted the technique or how they brought their own perspective to it. And that word of the purist is really key, because there is that tension. And that in the mission that we have as people, we inherited a legacy and who are trying to pass it on. And so, of course, Graham, but all the rest, Bob Fosse, and any in art, in religious cults, maybe, it's exactly what's always happening. I think it's great to ask that for dance, because so that tension is going to be there no matter what. Even if you are a purist and you want to keep it the way it is impossible. We have to be very clear about that, right? That's why we started today talking about the principles, because those can be kept intact, but not the form, not the shapes, not, like you can't get attached to how it looks. And Graham actually hated that. Like, she was not interested in how things looked. You have to bring the inside out. And so, yeah, if you're performing a piece about the rise of fascism in Europe in the 30s, you're definitely going to do differently if you do it in the 30s, if you do it post Second World War in a kind of consumed society world, or if you do it right now, with COVID and etc. There's it's very clear for the repertory that dancers adapt and find their own ways to perform the repertory, and it evolves, and the costumes sometimes are changed and the sets are changed, and you go to a different stage and they don't have the same lights and etc. So but somehow for the technique, people get really curious about it and they want it to stay the same. I think it's not a matter of, do we want to keep it the same or do we let it adapt? It's changing, no matter what. I think it's really about if you're within the mother institution, I mean, the answer is kind of clear, right? Like, you're hired to do a job that's very clear. Here's the Graham company, here's the Graham second company, here are the students who travel the world to come and learn the Graham technique. Here you are to deliver, and to do in the tradition of Graham, etc. But the moment you step outside of New York, the further away you go, whether we're talking in time or in space, it's impossible. It's impossible because actually what you embody, and even physically, you cannot keep doing it the way you were trained in New York. And so I think either you're honest about it, and so you go with the flow, or you kind of, resist it. And I have respect for different perspectives regarding that. But I think if you're not in New York, the tension is there, but it's like in New York, at least it's like almost the same weight. So you could decide to go there or there. But if you're abroad and if you're far, it's almost impossible after years to want to be a purist. And the people also don't, again, there's a ritual, and in New York, there's a sacred place. I mean, what we saw in the video of Mathilde today is not the original place. That was actually the Cunningham studio. That is now where the Graham School is working. but the original place at 63rd Street, when you hear people talk about it, even like everything was sacred. The floor on which a lot of people had done that things on the knee and had sweat, and there was the studio of Martha and etc. So again, if you want to be a purist, then if you're in the sacred space with people who do the ritual with you, I think that makes sense. But if you're far away, what purpose does it serve? You want to say something?
Did you want to say anything? I know you were coming in earlier with a question, or no?
Well, first of all, thank you so much to everyone for presenting your live work and your videos. It was really beautiful to see. And I really appreciate this discussion about tradition and transformation. And I was reminded of a really nice quote from Virginia Woolf that I think applies here. She says, a body that goes on changing is a body that continues to live, in this sense, to like not reject the question of aging that's visible or the shifts and the changes that we notice, but the fact to celebrate that we're still alive, that it's still here. And I think we can apply that to a work of art or to a technique as well. But on that note, I'm just curious to know what you think about shifts in training today, where dancers, at least many of them in the United States especially, but around the world, are taught to be very versatile and to be able to be competent in any number of techniques, where you might see a lot less specialization than you did in the past. And I'm wondering, in the future, what does this mean in terms of the space given to the individual dancer with their body type that is going to reflect all of the knowledge and the heritage that they may take from various sources, and what is the role for that in Graham, or how might that manifest differently? And just to provide an example, because I know many of us here in this chat came to see the Graham Company, I think in 2018-19 season in Paris, and I was quite shocked because, well, I'm 40 years old, so Martha Graham died when I was 11. She was a very prominent media figure when I was a child, and I used to see dancers that I really admired for a certain muscular strength. And I was shocked to see the company several years ago and how frail many of the women looked. They looked very balletic to me in terms of their body type. So I'm just curious to hear your points of view about training, the role of other dance styles, and how that might interface with Graham technique and future performances.
It's interesting what you said about the body types and the fact that over the last decade, probably a little bit more than the dancers of the company, the profile, the type of dancers have started shifting and into more of that classical ballet trained aesthetic. Because yeah, I remember watching lecture demonstrations from the early 2000s and noticing how different their bodies were compared to now, and how more diverse also they were in height and shapes. Now I feel like it's more standardized in a way. But I feel like this is not specific to Graham. Actually, I feel like this is getting this is kind of the how things are in most dance forms nowadays. Even though there's debate on body positivity in the media and in everyday life, it does not really translate. It doesn't really show on stage. But I'm getting lost in what I'm saying. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what I was. I wanted to say that about what you said about the body types. Yeah, would you have something else to say about the rest of the question?
For the training, yes. it's a whole different context today. If we go back 40, 50 years ago, people were choosing a school, right? So they were specializing, yeah. And the people who were having those big companies and who were famous had created, like Graham, their own training, and they were training dancers. And we shifted from that to an era where choreographers are creating choreographies and they're not training dancers. And the contemporary dance world went to that weird place where ballet is the #1 technique that most people use. I'm talking about big companies right now. If we're talking about smaller companies, it's very eclectic and people are taking it from all over the place. And if I talk about France in the 90s, it was some yoga, some Feldenkrais, a little bit of Cunningham, a little bit of Reese. I mean, it was diluted. And I am not very comfortable with the idea that a dancer should do everything and that you are used by a choreographer to do whatever and that you should just do anything. If some people can do it, it's amazing and they're beautiful dancers and that's a great quality to be able to do that. But in terms of training, I think it does a lot of damage because then you're learning to quickly imitate styles and you don't have structure a lot. Or again, if you're looking for structure, you go to ballet, which is amazing, but which has a philosophy of something a few centuries, old. And when you're teaching Graham, that's a real question because you know that decades ago, people were not exposed, didn't have the internet, they were not exposed to so many different styles. And so it's really hard because they don't want to commit. They don't understand why they should spend years to learn sequences, to, scratch and try to understand the entire system of training when they'll go to an audition and it will not be connected to that. And so I think what was reflected also for the Graham Company is that I don't think there's any dancer today in the Graham Company, but also in the last, definitely years, but even more decades, who was only training Graham. And that was the case when the company started. And for many decades, they were only training Graham. And so they started with very basic Graham because they needed to learn academic dancing with Graham. And so it's a very different thing to, for example, teach shift of weight, which is a very difficult principle, I think. The way you use your weight and that relationship to the floor and to gravity, it's very hard to do when people have done 15 years of ballet and maybe some jazz, and they'll learn some contemporary styles. You can't do it the same way. And again, I don't think it's a bad thing in itself. I just think that the fact that people were kind of choosing one style or one school would go to work with this kind of person, it was a different society. And today it's all about being flexible, doing so many different experiences. And I don't think anyone will do one career with one choreographer anymore. But then there's really a risk that there isn't enough structure in the training and that, again, dancers are being used and it just feels like to me, it's a very consumerist behavior. They just need to do whatever you want them to do. And you don't take that time, like Graham was doing or other people, to train them. And that takes time and that takes commitment. But there is a deep relationship being created between the performer and the choreographer. And today it's very fluid and it's very detached. So, yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that consumerism, I was actually thinking the same thing, and it ties back into the body type issue because people want to, so often it's a case of, oh, you get to the final of an audition and if you fit the costume, you get the job. They're not going to tailor anything to you. It's like, this is our blueprint, and if you fit that mold, great, and if you don't, sorry, there's somebody else out there who we can get in there. And so it does, like, we just want a machine of the exact same look and style so that we can easily feed people through. And it is just that idea of consumerist mentality and using dancers and losing a bit of the individuality. Sorry, trying to put that in there.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think this is a very it's a really interesting place in the discussion about the young generation of dancers coming up and about the nature of the work. And I think, it's really well described there. I'm conscious of time, as always, and I'm wondering whether if there's anything burning left to be said, but if we might finish up within the next, we will probably run until about 5 or 20 past the hour here in Ireland. But if there's anything burning left waiting to be said, we could do that. And otherwise we might just consider drawing this session to a close. But if anybody wants to say anything, please do. Well, that shut them all up. I didn't mean to. It's just, it's like everything. We're only getting into the really good stuff right now at the moment. But I guess we just have to say that we have to come back and talk about these things again. But it's been a great kind of an overview, a kind of a panorama of from the very beginning to where we are now. And the other thing just that maybe I would say is that the other thing that happens with a company like Graham, or indeed with Merce Cunningham, is when the central person, the creator, dies, it's a huge identity crisis if the work is not being created from that place anymore. Sorry, there's a lot of noisy things around. It's Saturday, children are playing, cats needing to be attended to. But yes, I just wanted to say that when the central person dies, that's a big shift. I want to thank you all. I want to thank Rafael and Jean-Baptiste and Mathilde for bringing your incredible wisdom and your really lived experience here today. It's just been really exciting, and there's always a touch of pain, I feel, when considering any of these issues. It just brings it up. I don't know if anybody else feels it, but I certainly feel a little bit of the pain of this kind of creative dilemma that we find ourselves in, quite apart from the COVID dilemma, which is another one. But yes, I just want to say thank you. And one other thing just to sort of say, if it's not blindingly obvious, is that all of the dancers who are performing with us during this week have not probably been in class for over a year. These are dancers who are, I'm saying the obvious. If you cannot be in the place where you need to be to tune up your instrument, it's incredibly difficult to believe in yourself as a dancer and even feel you can wake up in the morning and say, I'm a dancer, not alone to come on and perform as a dancer. So I just want to say that these are exceptionally strange times for the art form of dance. And just to sort of mark that, or to put a marker on that one. Okay, now we were going to take a short break, but I think in view of the fact that we're almost coming to the end of the official time, we won't take a short break. So what we're going to do for the remainder of this afternoon is we're going to look at two non-Graham choreography pieces. One of them is mine, and one of them is from Lorenza de Calogera, who was with us last night. And so first of all, I will introduce my piece. And before I do that, I want to introduce my dancer, Sarah Curran. If you'd like to just unmute Sarah and just give a wave or something and say hi.
Hi. Yeah,
hi, Sarah.
I hope that the connection is okay.
That's all right. So Sarah, as you know, we'll be showing a film of the first part, and you can get yourself ready then for the second section. Okay, thanks. Yeah. So I'll just start by saying this. This piece is a work in progress. I've been working on it for probably coming up to 3 years, which is a bit unusual. But anyway, it's a work in progress. It will be in 4 parts, and we have one part completely finished. The second part, the last rehearsal we had in physical proximity was 1.5 years ago. Sarah at present is training in London, and she was with us in Inchicore a few years ago, and she's an exceptionally beautiful young dancer, and I've loved working with her. I won't say too much about the piece except that its title is Coming Forth by Day. So we'll see part 1 already filmed, and then part 2 Sarah is going to live stream for us. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. And now we're going to move on to our final piece of this afternoon. It's been a marathon, wonderful afternoon, I must say. I'm enjoying it anyway. We're so delighted to have Lorenza de Calogera back with us today. Now, this is a pre-recorded piece. It's called Taisho Can. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Lorenza, you can correct me afterwards if not. But this is a piece that's part of a bigger work that I understand has many different performance possibilities with it. And this is a recording of a piece, of a version that I saw in Valencia when I was last there about 2 years ago. So we'll have a look at this piece, Taisho Can, choreography and performance by Lorenza de Calogera. Okay, so thank you so much, Lorenza. Well, I do it this way. uh, Lorenza is in some sort of, we can't hear her. There's an issue with her sound. We've tried phone, we've tried laptop, but I think it's meant to be that way. But I just want to, from the bottom of my heart, really thank you. You've been here waiting patiently for a long time. And, but that, yeah, just that I appreciate your dance, your performance, your choreography, your presence as a dancer on stage is really moving and really something that you don't see too often, I feel. So I'm so grateful that you're here with us today, and also yesterday. It was really wonderful. Yeah, so thank you. Yes. So I would just say, if anybody, oh, it feels awful, she's there, and but don't get worried, Lorenza. You know, it's just the nature of the way things are. I don't know, maybe you're meant to be the mysterious one. We're getting the lovely kisses, that's all that matters. So look, we're not going to stay too much longer, but just for everybody who's on the call, any of the artists present, or anybody, if you'd like to offer anything just in the last couple of minutes, please just unmute and speak if you wish. All right. I think it's a gentle sigh into the end of this session. There's a lot to think about, a lot to talk about, a lot to reflect on. And yes, some beautiful comments there coming in from Helen. Lorenza, you could hear a pin drop in her house, meaning, yes, absolutely. And what that means is, Lorenza, the expression "you could hear a pin drop" means everybody goes so quiet because they're so engaged in what they're watching. So yeah, thank you. I want to thank Mathilde. No, thank you so much, Mathilde. I appreciate your piece so much. You know, you may have been sent as an emissary from your sociology course, but that was, as far as I'm concerned, a happy accident, that a deviation that brought you into Graham. And I think what you have given to us is very, very, it's a unique, and it feels to me like a piece that is so needed, actually, just something. And I think the fact that you took the sound away, you know, we don't hear the sound of the footfall or anything like that. We just see the image and we hear this magical music that just haunts us. It's a really exceptionally beautiful piece. Thank you so much, Mathilde. Thank you, Lorenza de Calogera, being here tonight and last night. Emer Byrne, I want to thank you also for being such a great compadre and you know, friend in dance, who is in Bray, in my own town, and we're a little bit semi-detached from our schools at the moment, but we will continue to work together, Emer, and I wish you so much good luck into the future. Yeah. Marisa, what can I say except your presence here today is, as always, is like the heart of everything I'm doing. I appreciate you being here, and Frank as well this morning. Thank you very much. And Róisín, I just want to say thank you so much, Róisín. It's like you are an inspiration to me, and a joy to see you grow and develop. And I appreciate your mind as well as your body, your mind and your thinking. I want to thank you for that, and continued lots of good success to you, and continue work. Don't stop. Don't get tamed. You're young, be wild. Jean-Baptiste and Rafael, I just, again, thank you so much, you two. You know, you've brought something so alive and so real and so meaningful about Graham at this present time. You know, it's real what you're saying. It's from the horse's mouth, and also speaking to the fact that you are. It's a while since you've been to New York, so I really, really appreciate what you brought. And the workshop earlier this week, people absolutely loved it, and I know we'll work together again. I look forward to that. And Hannah, thank you as well so much for being on the screen. And Hannah's a dancer too, just in case people don't know, and is a fantastic dancer. So next project is we'll see Hannah dance. But thank you, Hannah, for everything. Thank you, Sarah Manson, who hasn't been seen on screen because she's busy social mediaing. She's busy connecting in a different way, and she's been doing an incredible job all week. Thank you so much, Sarah Manson. Thank you to Rory O'Sullivan, who's a Bray person as well, and he and I know each other for a good many years. So grateful for your help, Rory. You're such a great guy, and I love working with you. And Curtis, you've been you're like a pilot there. You're like, it's like pilot school. We're all in pilot school and you're teaching us. Curtis, you've done an incredible job. Thank you so much. We couldn't have done any of this without you. Thanks a million for everything. Christian Daly, who's not in the build, not here and up the call with us, but he's been working on the website and on the graphics and everything. I want to thank you so much, Christian. And finally, I'd like to thank Karina Buckley, who's she's kind of like the secret. What is the person who's secret, who's never seen, but they perform all the little rituals and everything happens perfectly. Okay, so we will finish for today for now, our Martha Graham focus and our choreography afterwards. And we meet for our final session in half an hour from now, which will be the final night of screenings. And there are really, really wonderful screen dance and dance films to be seen. So please do come along if you can. Grab yourself a cup of tea and a nice warm blanket or coffee or something and come back, and we'll see you in half an hour. Thank you, everybody.